was still dark when the first bus of the morning hissed to a stop at the corner of Pine and Oak. The streetlights painted long shadows across the cracked sidewalks, and the sleepy town of Millhaven was just beginning to wake. Inside the yellow school bus, Walter Reed, a 58-year-old driver with kind eyes and a quiet soul, adjusted his mirror and took a slow sip of his coffee. He'd been driving this same route for nearly 20 years, through sunshine, storms, and snow. He'd seen thousands of kids grow up through the rearview mirror. But this year, something, or rather, someone, was different. Her name was Amaya Thompson. 12 years old, always sat in the same seat, third row from the back by the window, and every single morning, she cried. Quietly. Not the kind of crying that draws attention. No sobs or sniffles loud enough to make other kids turn. Just soft tears that slipped down her cheeks, the kind that come from deep hurt. Walter had noticed it the first week of September. At first, he thought maybe she was just nervous. New school year, new faces. But by October, the sight of her red, puffy eyes had begun to weigh on him. He'd watch in the mirror as she pressed, her forehead against the glass, tracing raindrops with her finger, lost in a world no one else could see. And every day when she stepped off the bus at Lincoln Middle School, she'd look back, just once, as if trying to leave something behind that always followed her. Part the seeing. The routine Walter wasn't the kind of man who pried. He'd learned long ago that kids sometimes just needed space. But something about Amaya tugged at him. That quiet ache that comes when you recognize pain too familiar to ignore. He began to notice little things. Her shoes were too small, her backpack torn at the straps, and some mornings, her hair wasn't brushed. One Tuesday morning, as the bus filled with laughter and chatter, Amaya climbed aboard in silence. Her hoodie was damp and she held it close like a blanket. "Good morning, sweetheart," Walter said gently, as he always did. She looked up, forcing a small smile. "Morning, Mr. Reed." And that was it. She went straight to her seat, sat down, and turned to the window. But that day, after she got off, something strange caught Walter's eye. When he walked down the aisle at the end of his shift, checking for forgotten lunchboxes and trash, he noticed a small folded paper wedged under Amaya's seat. He almost threw it away without thinking, but something stopped him. It wasn't homework. It wasn't a note. It was drawn in colored pencil. A picture. A stick figure of a little girl crying on a bus. Above her, words written in shaky handwriting, "Nobody sees me." Walter stood frozen. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at that piece of paper under the lamplight, his heart aching. Part D. The invisible girl. The next day, Walter decided to try something new. When Amaya boarded the bus, he greeted her with the same warmth, but this time he added, "You know, the sunrise looked lonely until you showed up." It was a silly thing to say, and he half expected her to ignore him. But for the first time, she smiled. A real one. Small, shy, but there. For the next few days, he made it his mission to brighten her mornings. Simple things, really. Playing her favorite radio station. Keeping a small pack of crayons on the dashboard, pretending he found them, then leaving them on her seat the next day. Slowly, she began to thaw. One afternoon, as the bus hit a red light, he heard her humming softly, a tune he recognized. "Lean on me," he said. She looked up, surprised. "My mom used to sing that." "She's got good taste," Walter said, but her face fell. "She doesn't sing anymore." Something in the way she said it sent a chill through him. Part 3. The note days turned into weeks. Thanksgiving came and went. The air grew colder, and so did Amaya's eyes. One Friday afternoon, the bus was nearly empty when she walked on, clutching her backpack tightly to her chest. Her seatbelt strap was torn. Her sleeves hid bruises. Walter's gut twisted. When she got off, she turned back and whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Thank you, Mr. Reed." He nodded, trying to smile. "Anytime, sweetheart." But when he reached her seat later that day, his breath caught again. There was another note under the seat, This one wasn't a drawing, it was a letter. Sometimes I cry because I'm scared to go home. Sometimes I cry because I miss my mom. She's here, but she's not the same. I wish people knew what happens when the door closes. Walter's hands trembled as he read. His chest felt heavy, that kind of ache that lives between sorrow and anger. He knew what he had to do. That evening, he drove straight to the school counselor's office and handed her the note. "I don't know what's going on, but this girl needs help," he said firmly. The counselor nodded, eyes wide. "Thank you for bringing this in, Mr. Reed. We'll look into it immediately." But the next few days brought silence. No change. No word. Amaya still boarded the bus with the same tired eyes. Part 4. The Discovery. The turning point came one cold Monday in December. Snow flurries danced in the air and the kids were buzzing with talk of Christmas break. But Amaya didn't show up. Not that day. Not the next. By the third day, Walter's heart was pounding. He asked the office. They said she'd called in sick. But something didn't sit right. That afternoon, as he cleaned the bus, he noticed a small glint under Amaya's usual seat. He bent down, and what he found made him gasp aloud. It was a tiny keychain, shaped like a locket. Inside was a photo, Amaya and a woman with tired but loving eyes. Her mother. Behind it, tucked into the metal clasp, was a scrap of notebook paper. "If I don't come back, please don't forget me." Walter sat down in the aisle, heart pounding. The world seemed to tilt. He knew now, this wasn't just sadness. This was a cry for help. Part 5. The call Walter didn't waste a second. He called the police, the school, and child services. Anyone who would listen. He even drove to the address listed in the school directory. What he found broke his heart. The small apartment was cold, windows cracked, dishes piled in the sink. A neighbor told him that Amaya's mother had lost her job, had been drinking, and that there were nights when yelling turned into silence that lasted too long. By the next morning, social workers were there. Amaya was placed into temporary care, safe for the first time in a long time. When she returned to school 2 weeks later, she boarded the bus quietly, eyes shy but brighter. "Hey there, stranger," Walter said, smiling. "The sunrise missed you." She giggled. "Did it?" "Sure did. And so did I." For the first time, she didn't sit alone. She moved up a few seats, closer to him. Part 6. The Christmas gift on the last day before winter break. Amaya waited until everyone else had gotten off the bus. Then she walked up to Walter and handed him a small box wrapped in old newspaper. Inside was a tiny bus charm, made of silver foil and string. "I made it in art class," she said. "So you don't forget me when I'm not here." Walter's voice cracked. "Oh, sweetheart, I could never forget you." She smiled softly, then added, "I'm going to live with my aunt now. Mom's getting help." "That's good news," he said gently. "You deserve to be somewhere safe." She nodded. "You helped me be brave, Mr. Reed." When she stepped off that day, she turned back one last time. But this time, she wasn't crying. Part 7. The years later, time rolled on, as it always does. Kids came and went. Walter grew older, slower. His hair turned silver, his eyes softer. But every morning, he still drove that same route, past pine and oak, past the small park where the sun rose over the rooftops. And every morning, he touched the little silver bus charm that hung from his mirror, Amaya's gift. One spring morning, long after he'd retired, Walter received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was familiar. "Dear Mr. Reed, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. You were the first person who ever saw me when I felt invisible. You didn't just drive a bus. You drove hope into my life. I'm in college now, studying to become a social worker. I want to help kids like the girl who used to cry on your bus. Thank you for stopping when no one else did. With love, Amaya Thompson." Walter sat on his porch for a long time, reading that letter again and again until the words blurred into tears. Part 8. The legacy. Years later, when Walter passed away peacefully in his sleep, the local paper ran a small story about him. They called him the driver who never missed a stop. At his funeral, among the crowd of family, neighbors, and old students. A young woman stood quietly near the casket. She held a small silver bus charm in her hand, polished, shining. It was Amaya. She approached the coffin, placed the charm on his folded hands, and whispered, "You didn't just take me to school, Mr. Reed. You drove me toward life." Outside, a school bus rolled by, filled with laughter and new beginnings. The sound of its engine faded into the distance, leaving behind the echo of a truth Walter had always known. The smallest acts of kindness can reroute an entire life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Amaya looked up at the sky and smiled. Somewhere in the hum of passing traffic, she could almost hear his voice again. The sunrise looks lonely until you show up. And in that moment she realized, the world will always have sadness. But as long as someone chooses to see, to care, and to stop, there will always be hope. 15 years later, the city had changed. New schools, new buses, new faces. But the Carter Transit Depot still stood proudly at the edge of Millhaven, its walls lined with photos of drivers who had served with heart. And right there, near the entrance, was a framed picture of Walter Reed, his gentle eyes and humble smile forever frozen in a moment of quiet grace. Below his photo was a bronze plaque. He saw what others didn't. He stopped when others passed. He changed one life, and that was enough. That morning, a group of teenagers toured the building as part of a mentorship program run by the Amaya Thompson Foundation for Youth Care. Amaya herself, now in her early 30s, confident, warm, and radiant, walked at the front, telling her story to a room full of young faces. She pointed to the photograph. "That's him," she said softly. "That's the man who saved me." The room grew still. Even the most restless students looked up, captivated. "When I was your age," Amaya continued, her voice trembling slightly, "I thought nobody saw me. I thought my pain was invisible. But he did. He didn't fix my life overnight. He just cared enough to notice." She turned, eyes bright, and that changed everything. A young boy in the back, maybe 12, maybe 13, raised his hand. "Did you ever tell him thank you?" Amaya smiled sadly. "Not soon enough. But I think he knew." Part X. The hidden letter later that day, as Amaya walked through the depot alone. She stopped near Walter's old bus, bus darn 27, now retired and kept as a memorial. The seats were worn, the dashboard dusty, but the spirit of his kindness seemed to hum in the air. She sat in her old spot, third row from the back, by the window, and traced her fingers along the seat cushion, and that's when she noticed something wedged underneath. Her breath caught. She reached down and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with time, edges frayed. On it, in shaky handwriting, were 3 words: "For Amaya, someday." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a simple note written by Walter before he passed. "If you ever find this, that means you came back, and if you came back, that means you made it. I always knew you would. Keep driving kindness. Kiddo, the world needs you behind the wheel now. Mr. Reed." Amaya pressed the letter to her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. The seat that had once held her pain now held her peace. Party fiend. Passing it on, the following week, Amaya sat at her foundation's office desk, staring at the framed letter. Outside her window, buses rolled by, the same hum, the same yellow glow in the evening sun. She turned to her assistant. "I want to start something new, a program just for bus drivers." "Bus drivers?" the assistant asked, surprised. Amaya nodded. "Yes, they see everything, the quiet kids, the scared ones, the invisible ones. They're the first faces of the morning and the last ones before home. Sometimes they're the only kindness a child gets all day." And so it began. The READ program for compassionate drivers, training school bus staff to recognize signs of neglect, abuse, and loneliness, and how to act with heart. It grew. Within a year, over 400 districts had joined, and in every training center they hung a photo of Walter and a small quote: "He didn't just drive a bus. He drove change." Part 13, the new generation one rainy morning. Amaya stopped by a local school to speak at an assembly. As she left, she noticed a girl, maybe 10 years old, sitting alone near the curb, backpack clutched tightly, tears in her eyes. Amaya knelt down. "Hey there, sweetheart. You okay?" The girl sniffled. My mom said she's too busy to come to my recital. Again. Amaya's heart ached. It was like looking into a mirror of her younger self. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small silver bus charm, and placed it in the girl's palm. This belonged to someone very special, she whispered. Whenever you feel alone, hold this tight. It's a reminder that someone cares, and even if you can't see them. The girl smiled faintly. Thank you. As Amaya walked back to her car, she looked up at the gray sky and smiled. I did it, Mr. Reed, she whispered. I kept driving, part 13. The circle of kindness years later. That same girl, now grown, became a school bus driver herself. Her name was Nia Brooks. And one cold morning, she noticed a quiet boy in the third row from the back, staring out the window with tears in his eyes. She didn't know why he cried, but she smiled and said, You know, the sunrise looked lonely until you showed up. He blinked, surprised, then smiled. The first real smile in weeks. And as the bus rolled forward, the little silver charm hanging from her mirror caught the sunlight, glinting like a promise that kindness never really ends. It just keeps passing on, one stop, one soul, one heart at a time. Final message in the end? It wasn't the letter or the locket or even the bus that mattered. It was the choice, the moment. Walter decided to notice, because one act of compassion doesn't just save a person. It creates a chain reaction that can ripple through generations, changing the way the world looks at pain, at love and at each other, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of engines and asphalt, Walter smiled. You did good, kiddo, his voice whispered on the wind. You kept the wheels turning. It was spring, the kind that smelled like new beginnings. The city had declared it Walter Reed Day, a celebration of kindness and community. Buses across Millhaven decorated their windshields with ribbons that read, Drive with Heart. At the Carter Transit Depot, hundreds of people gathered. Former students, drivers, families, children, all carrying stories that had once been shaped by a single man's gentle courage. Amaya stood on stage, holding Walter's old driver's cap. The crowd quieted as she began to speak. When I was a child, she said softly, I thought kindness was something small, like a smile or a word. But then I realized it's not small, it's everything. Her voice broke slightly. Mr. Reed didn't just notice me. He believed in me, and belief is what saves people. She paused, looking up at the sky, blue and endless. Today, we don't just honor a man. We honor a way of seeing the world. As she finished, every bus in the city honked at once, a long, harmonic wave that rolled through the streets like a heartbeat. Amaya smiled, tears streaking her cheeks. In that sound, she could almost hear him whisper again, Keep driving, kiddo. You're doing just fine. Part 15. The hidden passenger. Later that night, Amaya stayed behind after the event, sitting in Walter's old bus. It had been restored. The same wooden seats, the same faint scent of oil and dust. The same little mirror where he used to glance at the kids with fatherly care. The city lights glowed outside, reflected in the glass as she sat there. She closed her eyes, and in the soft hum of the depot, she heard it again, footsteps, a jingle of keys, a low, kind voice. She opened her eyes, and though she knew it wasn't real, for a moment she saw him, Walter, sitting in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, smiling back at her through the mirror. He didn't say a word. He just nodded once. That same quiet, knowing look that had always said, I'm proud of you, Amaya whispered through her tears. Thank you for seeing me. Then the vision faded, like a sunset slipping behind clouds, but the warmth stayed. Because some people don't leave, they just ride along quietly inside us. Forever. Part 15th, the bus stop a few weeks later. Amaya visited a new school, where the foundation had donated its 100th community bus. Before leaving, she walked over to a small group of kids waiting at the curb. One little boy, no older than 8, sat alone, hugging his backpack. Hey there, she said gently. You okay? He shrugged. Just nervous. First day at a new school? She smiled. You know something? Good bus ride can change your whole day. He looked up, curious. Really? Amaya nodded. It changed my whole life. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a little metal pin, shaped like a steering wheel. Here, keep this. It belonged to someone who once helped me. Maybe it'll help you remember? You're never really alone. The boy grinned, holding it tightly. What was his name? He asked. Amaya looked toward the horizon. His name was Walter Reed, but you can just call him Kindness. Part 16th. The last route years passed. Amaya grew older, slower, but never stopped working. The world she and Walter built, of empathy and awareness, had stretched far beyond Millhaven. One evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, she took a quiet bus ride for the first time in decades. Same route, same road, same gold light filtering through the windows. She sat in the third row again, the same seat she once cried in. Her hand brushed against the worn leather. She smiled faintly and whispered, "I made it home." Outside the window, a child waved from the sidewalk, smiling bright, backpack swinging. Amaya waved back, tears soft and content. When she closed her eyes, she saw a young girl crying under a seat. She saw a kind old man noticing. She saw every act of compassion that had ever come after. And then, peace. Part 19th. The eternal road the next morning. The depot was quiet. The sun rose gentle and slow. On her desk, Amaya's assistant found a note in her handwriting. "If I've gone ahead, don't be sad I just caught the early bus. I'll save you a seat." She was gone, peacefully, gracefully. Like a sunrise fading into day, the city mourned her like it had mourned Walter years before, with gratitude, not grief. The next day, every bus in the country dimmed its lights for 1 minute, and then, as if guided by the same unseen hand, they honked together one long, tender note of remembrance. And somewhere, far beyond the clouds, two souls sat side by side in a shining yellow bus, riding into a horizon that never ended. Walter smiled. "Told you we'd see each other again, kiddo." Amaya laughed softly. "Guess some rides just never stop." The road stretched on, endless, golden, alive, and beneath it all, the hum of kindness kept the world turning. Moral of the story: you never know who's watching. Who's waiting for someone to notice them, to listen, to care. Because sometimes the smallest gesture, a word, a glance, a simple, "Are you okay?" can save a life. Walter didn't just drive a bus, he drove hope. And Amaya didn't just continue his legacy. She proved that kindness, once set in motion, never stops moving. Keep driving, kindness. The bus driver who saw her power of compassion. The world needs witnesses.